Did you know a corporation once deliberately diagnosed dying women with syphilis, not because they had it, but to keep them silent about the real thing killing them? The real thing was in their hands, on their lips, glowing on their skin. And there's a detail buried in this story that I genuinely didn't believe when I first read it. But what happened to the place where all of this took place? That part might disturb you even more. If you've ever worked a job where you trusted your employer to keep you safe, this story should chill you. In the early 20th century, the U.S. Radium Corporation operated out of Orange, New Jersey. The women who worked there, mostly young, mostly poor, were hired to paint watch dials with luminous radium paint. The company that employed them knew radium was dangerous. The women did not, and the number that stopped me cold is coming up. Here's what you need to understand about radium in the 19-teens and 20s. It wasn't feared, it was celebrated. Radium was marketed as a miracle substance. People drank radium-infused water as a health tonic. Radium was added to toothpaste, chocolate, even suppositories. Against that backdrop, when the U.S. Radium Corporation told young women the paint was perfectly safe, why would they question it? They were instructed to use a technique called lip pointing, wetting the tip of their brushes with their tongues to get a fine point before dipping into the radium paint. Every single stroke meant swallowing a tiny amount of radioactive material. They did this hundreds of times a day. Some of the women painted radium on their nails, their teeth, their eyelids, just for fun, just to glow in the dark when they went out dancing at night. They called themselves ghost girls, and for a while, the job was the best thing that had ever happened to them. The pay was nearly 3 times what most factory jobs offered women at the time. That was the hook, and it was by design. By the way, if this kind of dark history grips you the way it grips me, hit like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about these forgotten stories. What I'm about to show you is the part most people are missing. The women started getting sick. First, it was their teeth. Teeth loosened, then fell out. Jawbones crumbled, literally crumbled. Dentists would reach in, and pieces of bone would come away in their hands. Then came the anemia, the fractures that wouldn't heal, the tumors. One worker, Grace Fryer, tried to open her mouth for a dentist, and her entire lower jaw broke away. Another woman, Amelia Maggia, died at 24. Her cause of death was listed as syphilis. That was not an accident. That was the company's playbook. According to Atlas Obscura, when women became ill, corporation doctors routinely diagnosed them with syphilis instead of radiation poisoning, a diagnosis designed to weaponize shame. Syphilis was a social death sentence in the 1920s. It implied sexual immorality. Families wouldn't come forward. Husbands questioned their wives. Women who were literally rotting from the inside out were told they had a venereal disease, and the silence held because the stigma was unbearable. The villain here was not just radium. It was the U.S. Radium Corporation's vice president, Arthur Roeder, and the company physician, who knew the truth and buried it. The women caught in the middle had no resources, no legal precedent, and a diagnosis that made them pariahs. Stay with me. The last part is what actually matters. Here is where this story turns in a direction nobody expects. 5 of the women, Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, and sisters Quinta MacDonald and Albina Larice sued the corporation in 1927. They became known as the Radium Girls, and their case was considered nearly unwinnable. They were sick, some of them too weak to raise their arms to take the oath in court. But they won. Their lawsuit didn't just get them a settlement. It fundamentally reshaped American labor law. Their case established the legal precedent that corporations are responsible for the health of their employees. It laid the groundwork for OSHA. It changed how we handle occupational disease to this day. Every safety regulation you have ever taken for granted at your job exists in part because 5 dying women in New Jersey refused to be quiet. None of that was the real shock. The real shock is what stands on that ground now. The former site of the U.S. Radium Corporation, the building where women licked radium brushes and were told they were fine, is now a family-friendly public park. Children play there. The site was part of a Superfund cleanup, and the EPA declared the surface safe. But beneath the manicured grass, the history glows. Before I go, here is your historical footnote of the day. In 1932, a wealthy American socialite named Eben Byers died after drinking nearly 1,400 bottles of a radium-laced patent medicine called Radithor over 3 years. When they exhumed his body decades later, it was still radioactive. His jaw had disintegrated. Holes had formed in his skull, and his bones had essentially been eaten from within. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline that became infamous. The radium water worked fine until his jaw came off. His death helped trigger the FDA's authority to regulate such products. One man's gruesome end gave the government power it still wields today. That is your footnote for today. Those 5 women were too weak to lift their hands to swear an oath, but their testimony still protects you every time you clock in. Subscribe to Weird History. I cover this every single day. See you tomorrow.